Live from the back of Ruth the Realtor's car, it's the Stacking Deeds Show. I'm Ruth's neighbor and part-time mechanic, Neighbor Doug, broadcasting live from Ruth's spacious, luxurious recording studio in the trunk. We are headed out of town for a special Memorial Day celebration. On today's show, we'll catch up with Julian Saunders, co-founder of Rich and Regular. Julian talks about how he sold all of his properties to pursue a dream life of financial independence and purposeful living. In our headlines, we'll discuss the fireworks around dealing with mortgages after one passes through the pearly gates without a will. Then, the phone in the back seat rings red, white, and blue with a question from Tina about dealing with bad tenants. And don't worry, I'll share one hot dog of a trivia question with you. And now, two hosts who won the Tag Team Hot Dog Eating Contest in 2023, Alan Corey and Crystal Hammond.
Thank you, Doug. Hey, Crystal, did you know we were hot dog eating contest champions?
No, and I hate hot dog eating contests. I think they should totally get rid of those altogether. It's like you should not be eating that amount of food in the first place for a prize. I will happily give you money to not eat hot dogs like that.
Well, I like how he called it a tag team. So I guess you would tag me, and then I would eat until I choke to death. I don't know. I know the hot dog eating contest is typically on 4th of July, but I consider Memorial Day weekend that's coming up the start of hot dog season. At least that's when I get the grills out.
Well, welcome to the Stacking Deeds Show. The whole reason we're here is we want you, the beginners, to buy your first piece of investment real estate.
Yeah, and you've done that, Crystal. Where are you in your real estate journey?
Well, yeah, so I always say if this girl from the south side of Chicago can do it, anyone can do it. I have some investment property. I'm a remote investor, so I'm in D.C. area and my places are in Chicago. And I'm at Condo Crystal in these Twitter streets. And then, Alan, where can we find you?
Yeah, I'm Real Estate Maxi. I'm the old grizzled veteran of real estate. I've been doing this for 23 years. I've got a portfolio of over 350 doors. I've done everything from new construction to flips to foreclosures to short-term rentals, long-term rentals, apartment buildings. I have a real estate addiction, so happy to talk real estate. Every day is something new for me.
Cool.
You'll never know it all.
You're going to learn a lot from both of us. What do we have in store for today's show? I'm very excited about today's show.
Yeah, on the show today, we got Julian Saunders, well-respected person in the personal finance space. We're going to hear his background on real estate, which is going to be eye-opening. He has a different approach than many, and he's learned some tough lessons he's going to share with us as well. And we've got a great property pop quiz coming up around the hot dogs, so I'm excited for that. But first, let's get into the headlines.
Hello, chaps. And now our Stacking Deeds headlines. Cheerio and pip pip.
What did you find here, Crystal? This seems very interesting.
Yeah, so in Fox Business, their personal finance section, Laura Adams takes a question from one of their readers. So it said, my dad passed away and I've been paying his mortgage. How can I get the loan put in my name? So this is kind of an estate planning kind of question. And a lot of us, we don't properly plan our estates. So let's get into what happens to a property when someone passes away, the mortgage.
And
too.
this applies if you pass away from choking on your hot dog too, right? Yeah.
Right. Yes. Timely.
So, I like that Laura Adams here. She says that, with death, a lot of it everything has to go through probate, which is the court's process to say who owns what. Right, all your assets get split up. If you have a will, it's much easier and it's much smoother. If not, then it can be a process. It takes 6 months to a year. I've been involved in many real estate deals that just never closed because the heirs were fighting over the property and there wasn't a will and it just sort of lingered on forever and the deals just never happened and the house just deteriorated and just because families couldn't get their act together. So the biggest takeaway for me is, have a will for sure to avoid this. But you got to think about a mortgage, right? A mortgage is given to someone who's approved for the loan based on their income. Obviously, if that person passes away, that mortgage just doesn't automatically transfer to the heirs because who knows if the heirs can afford that sort of mortgage payment. So there is a process to go through. It's tough to transfer that into your name. You can't just call up and said, my father passed away. I want it in my name now.
So here is her advice. After he secures ownership of the home, just reach out to the lender and let them know that he inherited his father's house. So the secure ownership of the home, she's just meaning after he's still living there?
No, well, after probate, that says who owns this house now, right?
Got
Because
it.
the person who owned it died. We now have to go through probate to determine, or read the will to determine who owns the house. And then once you become the owner of the house, then you can kind of open up negotiations with the mortgage company.
Got it.
And they don't have to give you a mortgage. You may have to sell. Typically, a refinance would happen and put it in your name, or you can just keep making the payments the best you can. But it's best to just be in communication and be open with your mortgage company rather than just try to wipe it under the rug.
Do the ostrich.
Yeah.
Stick your head in and say, well, that makes a great point too, because depending on how long his dad owned the house or how long the previous person was in the house, by the time the person dies, maybe they've paid off half the mortgage, maybe they've paid off, a big chunk of the mortgage, where now you're coming into the lender and saying, hey, I only need a mortgage on what's owed on the house, and that could potentially lower payments and things like that. I think a lot of people miss that part too. This could be a potential payment saving.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of situations where the children has inherited a house and they just live in the house and they just don't make the mortgage payments. And it obviously leads to a foreclosure. When if they would have sold that house immediately, there was $150,000, $200,000 of equity that they could have split up and had enough to pay for their house somewhere else. And they just sort of do the ostrich, like you said, and run up late fees and foreclosures, and it gets foreclosed on, and then they don't get any money. They live in the house for free for 6 months, 9 months, when they had just treasure chest that was left to them.
Right, they could have cashed in. And the taxes too, because that's another thing that a lot of these homes get sold or foreclosed for, not paying the property taxes.
Right. So it's really in your best interest to be proactive. On the other side of this, a lot of people think they're doing the right thing if they know that their end of life is coming soon, and they'll transfer that house into their children's name prior to their death. And this is a no-no, big no-no, speaking of taxes, because what happens is it's called a step-up basis. And that is when you inherit a home, let's say the house is worth $500,000, you inherit the house. On your taxes, it says, hey, I got this asset for $500,000. If I sell it for $500,000, then you don't pay any taxes because the IRS says you didn't make any money. You inherited something for $500,000. You sold it for $500,000. There's no gain, right? If that house was deeded to you or transferred to you prior to death, then the house value is what your father bought that property for. So if they bought that property for $100,000 15 years ago, 30 years ago, and now you own it, and then that person dies, and then you sell it, then the tax IRS man says, wait, you bought this property for $100,000 and you sold it for $500,000. So you have to pay taxes on that $400,000 gain. So you don't get that step up basis. And so that's a big no-no. Don't acquire the property in your name prior to a death. You want to actually do it afterwards.
Got it. So bottom line, do not do the ostrich. Get your affairs in order. So have a will clearly stating transfer of ownership of property. Is that?
Yeah, just who gets the house and when and how is it split. Yeah. And writing up a will is $150, $200, but it's worth it. It's going to save thousands of dollars to your heirs for sure.
And we just reach out to an estate planner, estate attorney, or we can just go on LegalZoom or something like that and fill it ourselves.
You get what you pay for. So depending how complicated your assets are, you could get away with sort of a LegalZoom situation. But yeah, if you've got some sort of complications, I would go directly to an estate planner.
Don't forget, we always have a link to all of our articles and the things we talk about in the show notes. So make sure you head to stackingdeeds.net/show notes to get the show notes delivered to your inbox.
All right, let's go pick up Julian. But before that, Doug's got a trivia question for us.
Hey there, Deeders. I'm Ruth's Fetch It Boy, neighbor Doug. And with the unofficial start of summer kicking off this Memorial Day, I've got my grill fired up, beer in the cooler, and my apron on. Oh, who am I kidding? The beer's already in my hand. Am I supposed to wear pants to this thing? Anyway, each year, my favorite sport, Major League Eating, hosts a televised hot dog eating contest to see which professional eater can consume the most hot dogs in 10 minutes. The current record holders are Mickey Sudo with 48.5 for the women and Joey Chestnut consuming 76 hot dogs for the men. But the question for you today is, where is this consumption of a carnival act held each year? Chew on that, and I'll be right back after I research how to remove grill marks from human buns.
Big news. We've partnered with Steadily Landlord Insurance, America's best-rated landlord insurance provider. Discover why landlords nationwide are choosing Steadily for their insurance coverage. Get a quote online in minutes at stackingdeeds.steadilypartner.com. We'll also put a link to that in our show notes. Steadily was founded by landlords for landlords and specialize in landlord insurance. They've made their mission to be the absolute best provider in the market for dwelling, umbrella, builder's risk, renter's insurance, and more. Go to stackingdeeds.steadilypartner for your white glove insurance needs.
Hey there, Deeters. I'm your favorite apron-wearing and aloe-lathered trivia host, Neighbor Doug. Nathan's hot dog eating contest is televised annually on ESPN. But what beachside locale hosts this gluttonous American pastime? You can take a steaming hot New York subway train all the way to this gastro stop if you just get off where? Well, that's right, the town that introduced roller coasters and hosts the annual Mermaid Parade is none other than Coney Island, Brooklyn. If you want to compete this year, just know it's BYOC, which is bring your own condiments. I know you're relishing for some of my homemade concoction that I refer to as Doug's Daily Pickle. Your guess is as good as mine as to what's in there. All right, let's get back to the ride with Alan, Crystal, and today's top dog of a guest, Julian Saunders.
Hey, Ruth, do me a favor and pull over. I just spotted my old friend Julian Saunders. Fun fact, he cashed in on all of his real estate riches. I actually want to hear all about how he did that, and I want to get the scoop on what he's up to now. Come on in. Hey, Julian, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Do you want to take a ride with me just to talk some real estate and chat about you being Mr. Business Insider Best Investing Books of 2023?
Oh, okay. That sounds cool. Let's do it.
All right. So give a quick introduction. So tell our Dieter listeners who you are.
Yeah, so I'm a lot of things. And so I am the author of Cashing Out, or I should say co-author. My wife, Kirsten, is the other half. We wrote that book together. We are also creators at richandregular.com. We do a little bit of everything from podcasting to videos to blogging. And we're also speakers. We try to do a good bit of financial storytelling to try to inspire what we call better conversations about money.
Well, let's talk about these better conversations about money. So we're living in a go, 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 fast, 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 pace, pace, pace mentality, but we also need to get back to doing what we love. Your philosophy is get in early, do what you have to do so that you can cash out. You can get out to really spend time doing the things that you love. So tell us more about how we go about doing that.
Yeah, it's been a long journey for me. And so my professional career, this is probably my third one, but it really started in the kitchen. I started cooking at a very young age, shortly after high school. I just loved food and hospitality business because my parents are from the Caribbean. And so it was kind of natural to me to kind of fall into that industry. I jumped from there into the corporate side of the hospitality industry, where I really spent a lot of time focusing on branding and marketing and the internet, sort of in the, I don't want to say early days, but the mid days, kind of the web 2, I guess, now that we have a web 3.0. But what I learned as I got older, and certainly after getting married and having a child, is that I was on a bit of a cycle, is that there were always going to be these things that I just thought was going to be the most amazing thing. And then you get in there And you realize after a while that, all right, that was good. And you start looking for a new mountain to climb.
Mhm.
But what was really interesting was that it seemed as if work was just kind of taking more and more of my time. Like I would always find myself having to retool or trying to do more work or work harder. And the fulfillment just simply wasn't there. Conversely, I started pouring a lot of time into my hobbies, which at the time was really around wealth building and investing and real estate and learning about all of those things. And I just felt better learning and applying those things than I did compared to a lot of the things that I was doing in my former 9 to 5. And so after having a lot of conversations with people, I realized that I wasn't alone in that sentiment, that there were a lot of people that sort of missed and wanted that sense of fulfillment, but they were really afraid to kind of put themselves out there. And what I learned, I would say mostly from people in the financial independence movement or the FIRE movement, was really around focusing on investing and focusing on real estate and using both of those things as a tool to put you in a position to be able to walk away from doing that unfulfilling work to at least now having the option to focus a little bit more on doing the things that are important to you. And I think what's most important about that is not just the way that it makes you feel, but it also allows you to reprioritize your time. You know, like so much more of your time you get to spend doing the things that bring you joy. And whether that's learning a new skill or spending time with your child, spending time with your partner, sort of nurturing that relationship, or even just being there during your parents in their golden years. Like, I think the more that you own your time, the better chance you have to spend focusing on things that matter more to you than going to work.
That's true. Time is our number one commodity. And that's actually how we met. We're both a part of the same financial communities. A
Yeah.
lot of us need somebody to connect to, that are from different backgrounds, because a lot of people they're afraid to share, what they've gone through with money. Like a lot of us learned by trial and error. So let's talk about some trials and errors that you and Kirsten had, in the beginning stages of, figuring this out.
Yeah, well, I mean, gosh, I would say the very first trial was an error, right? And that was essentially me, like, sort of stumbling upon this movement, being hyper passionate about it and wanting to share it with her. And I naively assumed that she would just be head over heels and in line with it, but she was anything but. Like, she
hmm
did some quick research, did not identify with any of the stories or approaches that she saw because there was a lot of focus on hyper frugality, which is just something that she just does not identify with, even though it came a bit more naturally to me. And so that led to really, quite honestly, some judgment on my part, which led to a breakup. And then finally, we sort of found ourselves back together and started asking, like, what was that all about? But even after we got back on the same page, there were still quite a few stumbles and trips along the way. I think certainly as I think about our first venture into real estate, I mean, that was truly just sort of what they call baptism by fire, like just learning on the go. And, at the time I was like a lot of the listeners out there, like absorbing every single podcast episode that I could and reading every single book that I could, but also like getting out there and trying to see these properties and seeing if I could develop that eye that I felt that so many other real estate investors had. But through that process, I mean, we certainly made quite a few mistakes, and certainly in the closing process and just the whole every step of the way.
Well, yeah, let's dig into that just so people can learn things to do differently. So, were you happy with like the price? You think you overpaid for that place, or did you guys self-manage? What were your approaches?
So I wasn't too concerned with overpaying. I don't think that was the issue at all. Certainly not with our first property that we ended up renting out in 2014.
hmm
But at the time, we were both working remote jobs. And so I was traveling around 50% of the time, and Kirsten was traveling probably a little bit more than that. And we purchased this property. It was already fixed up. And so there's
hmm
very little work that we needed to get done. And so we were really excited about that. But the process of going through interviewing, like at the time, I thought that I could leverage a lot of the skills that I'd worked in corporate America, from organization and writing and being able to create my own leasing forms and do all of those things
Oh.
in an effort
hmm
to save money, only to realize that when it was time to do an interview or get a prospective tenant, that I needed to leave work from one side of
Oh.
town, fight through traffic, get to that property, only to be dealing with someone who, while they had checked all of the administrative boxes, was just very clearly not an ideal candidate. I mean, I think they were
Got
looking for
it.
like some under the table deals, like, hey man, maybe you could just help me out here. I know I don't have this, but if
No,
I slipped you some cash.
no.
And so there was that. There was also just the general discomfort that I felt as a man sort of being in these environments with these women in a home alone, like,
Oh,
or in a, like I was sensitive to it and I know that she was sensitive to it. And I was like, ooh, I don't know if I should be doing this. But at the same time, what's to stop her from pulling a gun on me or spraying me
that's
with mace? Like,
true.
who's to say? And so there were just
Hmm.
all of these things that I just underestimated, but most specifically time, right? There was just very little time. Like, even though it was just one interview, it might take me, or a walkthrough, it might take me about an hour and a half to complete, which when you're working a daytime job and you're hustling, like it's really, really hard to do. And so I'd come home drained with nothing to show for it, but then I'd still have to work at night because I'd missed sort of like the latter part of the day. And that process just took forever until I finally got wise, got a management company, and they were able to close that deal in about a week. And so that really saved me a lot of money. And I think that was 10% well worth the money.
Okay. And so then from then on, did they handle like all of the maintenance, upkeep, or was that annoying for you guys too?
Yeah, so it was interesting because one of my biggest fears and one of the things or risks that I was willing to accept were all of the stories that you hear. The late night call that there's a leak coming from upstairs. And we did deal with that a couple of times, but it was nothing catastrophic. But we did have, I think, an arrangement where there was a minimum amount of money where we basically gave the management company rights to just go ahead and fix it. Whereas if it were to exceed a certain amount of money, they would have to call us and ask us sort of for guidance or sign off, and then we'd move forward from there. But we were very, very fortunate. Again, we bought a property that was recently renovated. It was a foreclosure that someone had bought, fixed it up. And so we bought it at that appreciated value. But we knew at the time, it was again 2014, that there was still plenty of room to growth, just sort of looking at the cycle of properties in that particular area at the time. And we were right by that assumption. But yeah, the management company did a fantastic job. I know some people complain about, their experiences with management companies, and I had a few gripes over the years, but not so much that I was willing to put all of that responsibility back on my shoulder. Again, it was money well spent.
And what made you get a second property? Did you get one at the same time you had that first one?
No, so the first property
Oh,
we bought was in 2014. The second property was actually our former primary residence. And so we took that property, we had actually paid off the debt on that. And that was the
cool.
plan the entire time, is to pick up a rental property. We owned the property that we were living in free and clear. And then when we finally
Congrats.
moved from, thank you. And then when we finally moved from that property, we basically used the rent collected from the two that we owned to offset the rent into the home that we live in now. So that was the plan. And we were finally able to complete that second property, I want to say in 2018. So in 2018, between 2018 and 2020, we were using the rent collected from the two properties, one of which was owned debt free, to offset the mortgage into the home that we live in now.
Perfect. And then so what made you sell? What was the cashing out moment?
We ended up selling all of our properties, I want to say in 2020. In fact, we sold the last property days before the pandemic was officially announced. And the reason for that is because we just saw ourselves on a journey. And so it started with obviously this desire to build wealth. And one of the tried and true ways to build wealth was through real estate. But as we got more exposed to the internet and digital entrepreneurship, and then the creator economy became a thing and it's much more mature now. And we started thinking about other ways that we could leverage our skill sets, but also leverage the moment that we were in. And so by 2020, a combination of the pandemic hitting, us really kind of losing that spark and desire to be landlords. And, we had to do a little bit, I think, of overcoming a little bit of a stigma, because I think in our minds, we were so obsessed with the idea of believing that we would always own property, that we would always be landlords. But then we had to realize in order for anyone to buy, someone has to sell. Right. And
Yeah.
so it's okay to sell. It
Yeah. It's a
wasn't like
cycle.
us.
It is a cycle.
It's a cycle, yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're comfortable with these returns, then you owe it to yourself to take full advantage of that. It's no different than credit. Like if you have great credit, then I think you've earned it and you owe it. You owe
Hmm.
yourself to use it to your advantage. And I think we were in a very similar situation.
Well, I love that. It's like sometimes the time picks you. When it was time to sell, you had and investing in real estate gave you access to all this wonderful cash.
Yes.
And cash a lot of times leads to time freedom. So you were able to have that cushion and be able to pursue your next venture, which happened to be the content creation.
And it's been really fun. And thankfully, there have been people who are willing to pay us to sort of draw those connections over the years.
That's wonderful. Well, it looks like we've arrived at our destination. Ruth is kind of she just kicks us out of the car. So don't be offended. Where can our listeners go to find you and get more of Julian and Kirsten?
Yeah, so richandregular.com is our primary website. We're also on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook if anyone wants to follow us there and see some of the cool things we're doing.
Well, thank you so much for joining us again, Julian.
Thank you, Crystal.
Well, thanks again, Julian. What a great conversation.
I think what I learned from that and is also something he mentioned in his blog as well, that he got in real estate because he thought he was supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Like he just bought a house because he thought that's the next step. That's a way to growing wealth. And he didn't really understand the economics of it. And he made a fatal sort of, not fatal, I guess, but when you buy a property for your own residence, that's always an emotional, personal lifestyle decision. It's not real estate investing. Real estate investing is a spreadsheet decision. So just buying a house to buy a house, obviously that's not good. Just sort of doing your homework up front is always going to be necessary.
For investments. But I did like how they stayed with it. They kept the properties for a long time. And then they realized when it was time to pivot. And they're like, hey, we can make so much more money with, smaller effort making YouTube videos and things like that. So selling their real estate, the investment properties, it allowed them more time at home to do something else that they wanted. So I feel like if it weren't for those first steps of buying those investment properties and then being able to sell them down the line, that gave them a lot of extra cash to, hey, do whatever they wanted with their time. So that's why we want you guys to invest in real estate, because down the line, you may want to cash in on your equity on your properties to pivot to something else.
It gives you options. That to me is whether you want to sell it or keep getting the cash flow or live in it yourself, you just have options. That it's the biggest benefit to me. And it did seem to set him up with a great foundation to let him pivot and change his focus and where he wants to invest and what he wants to grow as a business for him and his wife. So yeah, I think real estate's a great platform to build a foundation from.
And it's true. They live in a way bigger house now. So selling those other properties gave them the opportunity to make a much, much larger down payment too. So that also speaks volumes in investing too.
Yeah, it's great. And I hear the phone ringing, which means now it's time for the last segment of the day. It's Rings Ruth Rotary. Crystal, you want to answer that?
Oh, it appears that this is a TikTok that a listener sent in. Let's give it a listen.
We all want to get mad at landlords. Like, they're these crazy people making up rules. Landlords are people that have been burned countless times. Leases are this thick because people just keep doing things that landlords didn't even think about. I bet you the first apartment was rented on pure trust. A landlord looked at a guy and was like, I can trust you. Of course you can trust me. Why would I mess up where I live? Who does that? As soon as the landlord leaves, this guy punches a hole in the wall and in it right there. And then when he moves out, a landlord has to write in a lease, don't in the walls. Why am I writing this right now?
Oh, that was pretty hilarious.
It's so true. I actually have in my lease, do not flush tampons down the toilet. I learned that and I said, I guess I got to put that in the lease now, So like, this is completely true. Like every sort of hiccup I've ever had, okay, let's prevent that from happening. We add it to a lease. But
why is it always the flushing? Yes, I had a $2,000 plumbing issue earlier in the year for a tenant flushing the flushable wipes. Even though they tell you they're flushable, those wipes are not flushable. Do not flush.
Yeah, the butt wipes are a huge problem. Yeah, everyone thinks that they're going to be flushable. Maybe in the most modern of plumbing systems.
Yes.
But yes, they clog up everything. And yes, what's great now is that it's in the lease.
Right.
Next time someone does something like that, you just showed them the lease and said, hey, you sign that you are responsible for fixing the clog if you do it, or if you flush something like this down the toilet. That's what I love about having a great lease, because it's not a debate. It's not hey, you're going to be a cool landlord, right? It's no, like, I don't know the answer to how to solve this. Let's see what the lease says. And if the lease says that you're responsible for it, then you're going to have to be responsible for it. If the lease says I'm responsible for it, I'm going to be responsible for it. And a lot of times I'll buy a property and I inherited another landlord's lease. And so I don't know the answer. So someone's like, hey, we've got a mouse control out of the way. Can you fix it? And my answer is always, well, let's see what the lease says. And if the lease says tenants responsible for pest control, then they are. If the lease doesn't mention that at all, or it says the landlord is, and then I do it. So every communication is, well, let's see what the lease says. And if it's something that seems to be reoccurring, then I start adding it to the lease whenever it comes lease renewal time.
So when you inherit a property and it already has a lease, what are the rules on that? Like, are you allowed to change the lease after a certain amount of time, or are you stuck with whatever lease that it comes with?
The lease conveys with the property, which means I have to honor the lease that's already in place. So I can't change it until that lease ends. So I have to assume everything that the landlord and the tenant agreed to. I'll tell you, quite often, there's a lot of handshake agreements. There's a lot of verbal agreements that didn't make the lease. But when I become the new owner, I let the tenants know I can only enforce what's in the lease. I can't enforce anything that's been verbally discussed, because I don't have knowledge to that and it's not written down.
Makes sense. And that is interesting that one of the standouts had been flushing, because I'm trying to think of what other horror stories I've had that led me to change leases. I know pets have been involved in a lease change, because one of my tenants had, what did they have? They had some animal that was a crossbreed of something in a cage when I just it wasn't a random pop-up, but I, gave a 48-hour notice to come visit. And I was like, wait a minute, we didn't discuss this pet. So I know pets are a big part of leases.
Yeah, it's usually one person signs the lease and you go by and 6 people are living there, right? So
yes,
I always make sure that only the people whose name is on the lease are allowed to stay in the property. And that's a common one.
That's a big one.
Smoking, fires, whether it's grilling outside, depending on the property, I'll have different rules. Being able to sublease it. A lot of them just start putting it on Airbnb or something. And I usually don't like that, but it depends on the property. But it's just sort of who's living here and what are your responsibilities and roles and responsibilities while you're living here.
That's a great conversation. That's a lot of things that I totally didn't think about. If you have a question for Alan and I to answer, make sure you head over to stackingdeeds.net/voicemail. Leave us a message. You could be a voicemail or it could be an email, and we will answer your question just like we did for this TikTok today.
That was a fun episode. I loved talking hot dogs. I hope everyone has a good Memorial Day grilling out. It was great that Julian Saunders could drop by as well, author of Rich and Regular.
Yes, I always love a good cookout. So I hope to attend some cookouts, weather permitting. And I'm still working on developing my large lots. So I'm making small progress in that. So that'll be my weekend. 2 lots that you each got for $1 that you're going to develop duplexes on. Is that right? I have 4 lots and paid $1 for that City of Chicago's program. And we're up to 4plexes now. We want to get 6s, but we'll need another rezoning letter for the alderman. So we have a letter from the old alderman giving us permission for 4plexes. But now that we have a new alderman, let's see if we can get 6plexes, because apparently it doesn't cost that much more to go from a 4 to a 6. Didn't know that. You wanted to do the most density possible. I'm not familiar with the term alderman. Really? So yeah, the City of Chicago, we are divided into different, like it's the county. So it's the step below the county. So each ward has an alderman. So I'm in Ward 7, I believe. So yeah, so we have a new alderman that gets elected. Okay, so that's your representative who's going to help push this through and get you the zoning. Yep, because you want to know what the alderman wants for the community. You want the alderman on your side for your projects. Awesome. Well, that's exciting. Keep us posted. That's a big project to get off the ground, but it's an exciting one. Yeah, I got the first 2 in 2017, and here we are in 2023, finally getting something started. That's so much fun. I'm working on, I'm trying to just sort of
maybe wrap my mind around another book, some real estate courses. I get a lot of newbie real estate investor questions. So I've started a newsletter where I sort of educate through a weekly advice column. So I love writing and I love real estate. So I'm really focusing on marrying the two there. Let's throw it to Doug. Doug, what should we have learned today?
So, what should we have learned today? First, take some advice from Julian Saunders. Investing in real estate early on can fund your life dream. Second, make sure you write a lease that's as tough as the digestive systems of those hot dog eating contestants. But the big lesson? I've just been informed that the apron ties in the back, not the front. Well, I mean, live and learn, am I right? Thanks to Julian Saunders for joining us today. You can find out more about his work at richandregular.com. We'll also include links in our show notes at stackingdeeds.net. We'd also like to thank all of those who served and paid the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom on this Memorial Day weekend.